outside. They all come. Okay. Thank you.
So I have one
Morning.
input for my me and one for
Suprabhat.
them. Okay. And this is addition to
Atulji.
very good. Thank you.
So, thank you so much once again for assembling here today, and thank you. Our chief guests are here. One of them we are still waiting for, Mr. Khan, but Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Niranjan is here. We'll begin shortly, but in yesterday we did a round of introductions of most of you, but I see a few faces who were not there. कल जो यहाँ पे शामिल नहीं हुए थे इंट्रोडक्शन में, तो मैं ये चाहूँगा, ये रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि आप लोग खुद को इंट्रोड्यूस कर दें इस जमात में, फिर देन विल मूव अहेड. कैन वी बिगिन फ्रॉम दिस साइड? इधर से आई कैन सी अनिल जी सिटिंग देयर. हमारे CSE के रजनीश जी हैं वहाँ पे. सो पीपल हु हैवंट इंट्रोड्यूस्ड योरसेल्व्स यस्टरडे, आप जरा एक एक करके माइक ले लीजिए. चलिए.
मैं अनिल शर्मा हूँ, दैनिक भास्कर,
दिल्ली.
Rajneesh Sari from Center for Science and Environment. I look after sustainable buildings and habitat.
So, just putting in a word here, बहुत लोग मेरे पास आ रहे हैं इस कैंपस के बारे में थोड़ा बहुत समझने के लिए, जानने के लिए. What I have requested Rajneesh is to probably try and we'll find some place and time when we can ask him to guide you guys. Right? Yeah, who's next? Yes, sir.
मैं ऋषि मिश्रा हूँ, लखनऊ.
गुड मॉर्निंग एवरीबॉडी. भास्कर त्रिपाठी, थॉमसन रॉयटर्स फाउंडेशन के लिए रिपोर्ट करता हूँ टाइम पे.
Right.
नमस्ते, अतुल देवलकर, महाराष्ट्र से हूँ, स्वतंत्र पत्रकार.
अतुल जी वेलकम. बहुत समय हो गया. Yeah. बिल्कुल.
So the mic here.
हाँ, जो जिन्होंने नहीं किया है, just please.
अखिलेश, मैं कैरावान में लिखता हूँ और निज्जर पे हूँ.
नमस्कार सर, मैं नेहा गुप्ता, भोजपुर बिहार आरा से इंडिया वाइस की रिपोर्टर.
और कौन है इधर? कोई है?
शिवानी फ्रॉम टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया. आई राइट फ्रॉम
प्रणव संचारी from WWF India.
Who else? Anybody who has missed out? इधर अच्छा, हाँ, उधर से घूमते हुए आएंगे लेकिन. Anybody who have missed out, please just introduce yourself quickly.
Assalamualaikum, Hazrat Hakeem Irfan Rashid. I write for Economic Times. I report J&K and Ladakh.
Good morning. I'm Varghese C. Thomas, working with Malayalam Agarwal from Kerala.
I am Aman from the Hindu newspaper. Why not Kerala?
इधर है लखिंदर जी, इधर यहाँ पे.
पूर्वाल, पत्रिका अखबार इंदौर से.
Good morning everybody. I am Preetha. I write and edit stories for Down to Earth.
आप सभी को नमस्ते. मैं राजेंद्र सिंह लैंडोक हूँ, राजस्थान पत्रिका पाली में रेजिडेंट एडिटर हूँ.
I am Pradeep and I have my own media platform Think 360 and I also work with the US channel Fair Observer.
Thank you. I think we're done. We were getting a few people from all over as well. I think they're on their way there at least. Okay. So thank you so much. आपके पास एजेंडा की कॉपीज हैं, तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि उसी दर्रे पे उसी समय सीमा के अंदर रहते हुए आज के सेशन, आज की जो सत्र हैं उसको ख़त्म करते रहें और बातें करते रहें. और बहरहाल बाकी लोग, आप सब लोग यहाँ पे ही रह रहे हैं, सब साथ में रह रहे हैं. सो प्लीज़ फील फ्री टू कीप ऑन डिस्कसिंग द स्पीकर्स. सम ऑफ द स्पीकर्स आर आल्सो, वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव देम विद अस हियर. And you can, find out time when you can speak to them outside of the sessions. Thank you. Sunita ji, can I request you to now?
Maybe if you can, let's ask Raj if wanted to.
Yes.
So.
Please. Mr. Libaran and Mr. Agarwal, please. Aye.
welcoming our two chief guests. Dr. Agarwal, he needs no introduction to anyone. He's a very familiar face. And what has always endeared me to him is the fact that we often do not agree, but there is a huge space for discussion. And I think that's what makes life so interesting and his work so fascinating, and his life so fascinating, because he has always crossed the red lines that are set by professions to say you cannot go beyond this, you need to stick within this, and he's prepared to engage. And I really, so thank you, Monte, thank you so much for being here with us. We are very, very grateful that you made the journey. Mr. Liberhan is a really old CSE friend, and as you know, he was the head of the India Habitat Center, but has really been a very interesting thinker and someone who's, putting light on a lot of the current issues as they are moving ahead. And that's why he's also the chair of CSE, so we're very privileged that we get his advice, we get his information, and I'm always calling upon him to ask him on, from everything from accounts to anything else, what to do, how to do. So very grateful that he's here with us as well. And I'm very grateful that you're all here. I mean, अभी शुभर्णो ने जो कहा वो बिल्कुल दिल की बात है. This one gathering means a lot to us. हम लोग बहुत तैयारी करके आप लोगों की जैसे खातिरदारी करने की कोशिश करते हैं कि this is our group, very precious, very important, and it is very important for us that we keep the tradition of media professionals learning and getting briefed on the science of what's happening. It is something that has actually started, and Jennifer will remember, and today at the release of the State of India's Environment Report at the Anil Agarwal meeting, this is actually, so can you help me to put my presentation? This is actually a real tribute, Montek and Raj, to our former director, Anil Agarwal. As we see it, and I will talk about my presentation, my assessment of the year, ये वाली जरा बंद कर दो, ये दोनों, हाँ. And I will talk about it. I look forward to this conversation I have with all of you. I think about what have I learned over the year and what I want to share with you in terms of the assessment, the extraordinary book that Richard puts together, the State of India's Environment Report, collates all this information so that we can share it with you, bring the information. But the point I was making is, why AED? And why the State of India's Environment Report? For us, today is really a tribute to Anil Agarwal. Anil was the founding director of CSE. He was a journalist. He started his career in Hindustan Times, moved to Indian Express, and then to the IID, and then came back to set up CSE. And his aim of setting up CSE was that he wanted an institution that will marry the two skills of journalism with academia. And so for his thinking was that journalism's skill is that it is timely, it brings the information as it is happening, and that captures the imagination of people. But academics is rigorous, it brings detailed information, in-depth knowledge. So for him, the creation of the first State of India's Environment Report, the work that we do at CSE, really was to bring both those skills together. The journalistic skill, the timeliness, the ability to explain things from the ground, what is happening, track that development, with the rigor of academics. And that's really what we try and do with our work. We try and do through the State of India's Environment Report. And that's also a tribute to SOE, and I really am grateful to Richard. I really am, because I did not have the courage to keep this tradition going. And he has single-handedly ensured that this tradition of CSE, the State of India's Environment Report, continues. So I'd really be grateful if you could give him a big hand. The first State of India's Environment Report was done when many of you were not even born, okay? In 1982. It was a report which helped the country to understand why should India care about its environment. It was a citizen's report, a report card from people to government. The second State of India's Environment Report came out in 1985. And in fact, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was so impressed by the report, he asked Anil to make a presentation to every parliamentary committee on environment and why it is so important for a country like India. So this is a long tradition. And the idea with the report is that when we write every day, we get a snapshot. Aaj kya hua? But we don't get a full picture. So the report collates that information, the analysis, the trends, for us to understand the big picture as well. Because the snapshot is as important, but so is the big picture and connecting the dots. So that's really what the State of India's Environment Report is. And again, I'm really, really grateful to my colleagues who have kept this tradition going. And that brings me really to the third reason for this Anil Agarwal dialogue. This is a tribute to our colleagues. Now, when I say our colleagues, I'm not only counting CSE, I'm counting all of you. Okay? This is the community. And I wrote here yesterday when I was writing this, and I want to very clearly say, this is the community which at one level drives the change. So all the people in the civil society, all the people at CSE and others who drive the change. But equally important is the community which amplifies the message. And that is so important because only then do we build the momentum for change. And that's really why today's day is so special for us. And please, I mean, this is not just words. We really mean it, that this is so important. And I want to thank, in this case, Shuparno, who has really again made sure that this tradition continues. It would have broken. It's tough to find the money, I can assure you. But Shuparno, make sure that at the beginning of the year it is, Acha, let's fix the dates for the next 8 days. Kab kar rahe hain? Kaise kar rahe hain? And thank you, Shuparno, for keeping the community together. I think in these dark times, we all need each other more than ever. And I think it's important, therefore, for us to meet, to just understand from the other what's happening and how we can do our own work. I'm not asking for a network here, that every story has to be written together. It's just about bringing all of us together as a community. So I said this year, 2024 is the year that the world changed. Why do I say that? One, it is the year that the climate changed. When I was in Rio in 1992, and we were talking about the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the impacts of climate change seemed very far away. And whatever we talked about, it was about modeling. Scientists keh rahe hain hoga, monsoon ka koi impact padega, kuch hoga. We are living it today. In 2024, each day, some region of the world or the other was hit by extreme weather events. And we learned, I think power cut. It takes a second to come back. We are on solar, I have to, jab Rajneesh dikhayenge, You have to go and see our full solar system and how we export and import to the grid. And we learned that the poor are worst impacted, but we also learned that climate change is a great equalizer. So the fires in LA and the houses of the richest and the most famous have gone down in flames, and they don't have insurance to cover their losses. You have to understand climate change is a great equalizer. So yes, our farmers are impacted, but so are the rich in the world. And that is a lesson that we need to understand. Today, scientists are saying this is the epoch of the Anthropocene, where human activities have significant impact on the planet's climate and ecosystems. And there is more and more evidence that every planetary boundary is being close to being breached. So if you look at the State of India's Environment Report, and this chart is from there, you will see every region of the world was impacted because of climate change and the extreme weather events that happened. This is a database that is put together by us at CSE, my colleagues Rajit and Kiran put this together. We take every day, so Ashok is here, Anil is here. The Indian Meteorological Department puts together a daily report card of where, in which part of India, has there been an extreme weather event. And remember, IMD has defined extreme weather event. We have not defined it. They have defined extreme as saying more rain than normal, more temperature than what should be there at that season, at that time. So they have defined extreme weather. They put together a daily report on their website, but they don't put together a consolidated report. So my colleagues actually take the trouble to download, and you have to understand how painful all this is. You know this as journalists. हर दिन की रिपोर्ट डाउनलोड करो, हर दिन की रिपोर्ट में से जो निकला है कि किस रीजन में क्या हुआ है वो डेटाबेस में डालो. So we are compiling this database, and if you look at it, what it's basically saying is that out in the months, in the first 9 months of 2024, 255 days out of 274 days, India had one extreme weather event in some region or the other. Lightning, heavy rain, heat wave, cold wave, cyclone, snowfall. And all this is the definition of extreme as defined by the Indian Meteorological Department. So we have to be clear that the impacts of climate change are happening now, because climate change is not about one snowfall. It is about the increasing intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. That is what you are beginning to see happen in our world. But what else happened in the world? 2024 is the year when half the world's population voted. And what is interesting is that voters voted against climate change in the richest countries of the world. And it is important for us to understand this, because these trends are going to be important for our future. Fear and insecurity in the world is leading to changes in government. There is fear of immigration. There is also fear of climate change policies which are driving up prices. So on one hand, there is the fear of people coming in, but there is also the fear now of governments taking action to reduce their greenhouse gases. And then there is the fear of the rich being left out of jobs. And what was very interesting, and I wrote an article on this, is that how the young voter, so for now, till now we've been hearing about the Greta Thunbergs of the world and all the young people in Europe being so anxious and worried about climate change. Yet, if you look at the data of this last year, the young voters, and particularly, sorry for all the men in the room, but young male voters have moved more towards right-wing parties. And I'm calling them right-wing. I mean, I don't care right, left. The point is they are climate deniers. These are parties which are saying very clearly, vote it to power, we will not do windmills, vote it to power, we will stop. And of course, the ultimate is Donald Trump, which is drill baby drill. So we have to understand that this is a moment in history when on one hand climate change impacts are increasing, on the other hand the denial is also increasing, and that's a lot also because that now these countries have to really take serious action to reduce emissions. Now, it's also important for us to understand that how these, what I call the super cycles, are impacting each other. The fact is, climate change, and I've talked about the increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. These are also breaking the backs of the already poor. So floods, drought, pest attacks, we know are not single day events. Your reporters, you see the ground, you know that जब एक दफे बाढ़ आती है तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं होता कि बाढ़ एक दिन में चली जाएगी. बाढ़ का जो दुष्प्रभाव है वो रहता है, लोगों की जिंदगी तबाह हो जाती है, उनके जानवर मर जाते हैं, उनके पास कुछ जीने के साधन जो थे वो खत्म हो जाते हैं. तो the impact of these increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events is that people will lose the ability to cope, and they are migrating. There is a report which Richard has been writing about for now 3-4 years, which is the World Migration Report. And this report actually now shows us that more people are migrating in the world because of slow onset climate change events than they are doing even because of war and conflict. So when you think of migration, you think of Syria, you think of wars in Africa, you think of that. But now it is clear that these increased intensity frequency events are also leading to migration. And as the world gets warmer, this will increase. So you can see the cycles coming together. On one hand, fear of migration is increasing and people are voting against climate change. On the other hand, the more we do not act against climate change, the more there will be more migration and more destitution. So you're really creating a world where both ends are pushing against each other. And then, in fact, I wanted Monte to reflect on, I know Monte will talk about this. So Monte, I call this the revenge of the rich. If you look at the 1990s, for most of us, we were looking at the ecological globalization that the world needed, the agreement on climate change, biodiversity, desertification, all the agreements that were needed because one country's impact had exceeded the boundary. And so you needed an ecological globalization framework, rules so that we could live together in one planet. But at the same time, you had economic globalization and you had WTO coming in. And WTO's basic framing was that we will move production to where it is cheaper. And why is it cheaper? Because there are less environmental rules and less labor rules. Now, as a result of it, production from the rich worlds actually moved out to those parts of the world, to our parts of the world, and we have benefited, others have benefited. We all now are locked into that system of economic globalization, where that production has moved, but the rich countries did not do anything to reduce their emissions. Now they are having to take those actions. And now, therefore, there is anger against the government, against renewable energy, against electrification. And in some senses, Trump has only capitalized on this anger. And they want their jobs back. They say that they want manufacturing back. And the question today is, where will the labor come from? And more than that, when they get the manufacturing back, will that not lead to more emissions now in their own countries? Till now, they have exported the emissions. China's emissions have skyrocketed because it's also manufacturing center of the entire world. So we are now really, as I call it, the one super cycle is impacting the other super cycle. And that's the state of the world today. But was at the end of the year, and it's a too large a development for us to ignore, that the world has been trumped. And there is no question in my mind that this is bad. There is no question in my mind. Climate change is being denied. Action to combat climate is being dismantled in the United States. Drill, baby, drill is the mantra. Fossil fuels are back with a bang. But what we need to worry about is two different impacts. One, this will mean that the US emissions will increase. Now, we have to worry about this because we had thought the US emissions had peaked in 2005. Now, particularly with artificial intelligence, and you may have heard Donald Trump often talk about the fact that with artificial intelligence, they will need to double their energy consumption. And he is now talking about captive plants in every data center to generate electricity to run the data centers. But more than that, what worries us is that not only will the US increase its emissions, but the US will be followed by all other countries. And that it will be easy to wind back the actions that we need to take. And this is when, and I want to make this clear, this is when the world has exhausted its carbon budget. Now, if you look at the carbon budget, and this is the data on the carbon budget, what is the carbon budget? The carbon budget is simply the amount of carbon dioxide the world can emit from 1850 to 2030 to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. That's the budget. That's the appropriation of the budget that has happened till 2019 and what is expected to happen to 2030. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is that you have to remember that the United States, the biggest was 24, and it was expected to go down to 22. But now with Trump, its share of the global budget will actually increase. China is 13, was expected to go up to 16. So we are basically talking about no space for the rest of the world at all. The appropriation that was done is now going to be complete. There are no apologies about it. The word climate justice, the word climate equity has become a dirty word. Now, the problem that we should have is that what happens to us? We need to grow, we need to develop, we need more energy. So where will that come from? And that's the big question that we have in the world today as the world moves towards 2025. So what then is my overall assessment of what we call the polycrisis? There are many wars. The first war we are completely losing is the war against nature. That is lost and losing. We are basically heading towards an existential crisis as temperatures increase. And as I explained, Trump will make it worse. But there is another war which is equally interesting, which is the war with China. And the war with China right now is the war over the old economy versus the new economy, the green economy. Because China today controls all the rare minerals, the battery technology for making the new green economy work. Now here is interesting, and I think as journalists we have to watch out. Today in the morning, I'm sure as all of you are, I'm addicted to Trump. So the first thing I do is to open and to check what Trump has said today. And what Trump has said today is that he has got the Ukraine deal signed. Okay? Now what is the Ukraine deal? It's about rare minerals. What is Greenland? It is about rare minerals. So we have to understand the geopolitics now in the world. Earlier on when we were all writing about all this, it was the oil politics of the world. Are Iraq kyun ja rahe hain? Oil chahiye. Now it's the war is over the rare minerals. But the question, and I find that a fascinating question, that even if Trump was back on his electrification plan and his plan for renewable energy, saying this is all in Chinese control, the fact is China has overcapacity in these technologies. So what will China do? Will it become the new reason why the world will move towards greener transition, because it has the technology and it wants to sell. So this will become a very interesting question. The other very interesting question to which I have no answer is, so now, right now, the globalization, the economic globalization, the one I talked about, WTO, is being dismantled by Trump. It's no longer free trade, it's free trade. Now, one idea is that this could lead towards localization. Move from globalization towards localization. Indonesia, for instance, has said it will not export its nickel. It has said that you come and produce batteries in Indonesia. We will localize our production. Okay? Will it lead to more localization, or will it lead to a more unfair trade regime, which is bad for the planet and bad for the people? I don't know. But it is something that we need to keep looking out, watching, and understanding. Now, in all this, and I want to move to the second part of my, what do we do? Do we just say Trump is doing this, so we should do nothing, and climate change now is history? I would argue with you, we cannot afford not to act. Why? Because we need environmental management for our own sakes. We need to reduce the health impact burden of pollution. We need to provide water security at a time when there will be more rain and fewer number of rainy days. We need to provide livelihood security to farmers so that they can grow food without losing soil fertility and add to cost. We need to act. And for us, climate mitigation is not the primary objective. It is the co-benefit. We do environmental management for our own sakes, and the additional benefit is to reduce greenhouse gases. So that's really got to be our strategy as we move on. In the SOE, we have data on why this is. The data on health impact is clear. The air pollution, no, please come, Amitabh. Sorry we started, but thank you for coming, Amitabh. I think everyone knows Mr. Khan, so I don't need another gentleman who doesn't need an introduction. But thank you for coming. Really grateful. So, as I was saying, Amitabh, I was at the second point of my talk, where I was explaining not only is the geopolitics of the world change, but we cannot afford not to act. And I was explaining why. For us, climate change is only about a co-benefit. It's about what we will get in addition to the improvement that we need in our world. We need to clean our air because the health cost of it is too high. The number of years we lose because of dirty air is not acceptable to all of us. It is also getting warmer at night because of the heat is increasing. And Rajneesh will talk about this. This is data that he has put together, which is how nights are getting warmer. And you will see this is for Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Hyderabad, Bengaluru, and Chennai. We are also getting more humid. And the reason this impacts is that the human physiology is made in a way that even if the days are hot, at night you cool down. And as you cool down, these are particularly for people who don't have access to air conditioners and to all the other instruments that we use to cool down our bodies. They need to cool down. And the data is showing the highest mortality. People die at night now because of the fact that nights are not cooling down. But again, the challenge is that this is about climate change, increasing heat, but it is not about climate change. It is also the way we are building our cities. We are destroying our green areas, our water bodies. There is more concrete, there are more vehicles. All that is giving out heat. All the air conditioners that we use are giving out heat. So all this will make our cities more unhealthy. So as I was saying, we can't afford to say that ये किसी और की problem है. ये हमारी problem है. And we have to fix our own problem. If we build more livable cities, we will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But we are building more livable cities because we don't want people to die in our cities. That has to be our focus as we move on. Rajneesh will present you this data, but I found it fascinating. He has looked at how urban centers are turning into heat zones in different cities, and he will present this tomorrow in greater detail, but you can see how urbanization is having a huge impact on the increase of temperatures. So what then is our good news? What is our state of environment 2025? One, there is good news, and I think we need to celebrate it as well. There is huge environmental consciousness, and we need to recognize that. In 2025 Delhi Assembly election, when CSTS went out and did a poll on what were the reasons why the AAP government was voted out, first time I have seen voters say Yamuna, state of air, and garbage. Which means that we have reached a point where these issues have become part of, and it's not, you can't say ये तो elite issues हैं, कुछ middle class colonies में फर्क पड़ा है. There is a large number of people who have talked about these issues, which means these issues matter. Then I'm always asked, but India mein to nobody cares about climate change. Nobody cares about the environment. And I always respond saying, go and ask a farmer of India and ask them about the state of their land, ask them about the state of their soils, ask them about the state of their water. वो बताएंगे आपको कि हमारे लिए जलवायु परिवर्तन मतलब रखता है. वो climate change word नहीं जानते हैं. जलवायु परिवर्तन वैसे ही हमने इतना कठिन शब्द बना दिया है कि किसी को समझ में ही नहीं आता, मगर वो समझते हैं कि कहीं ना कहीं असर पड़ रहा है और जमीनी असर पड़ रहा है. So I think we have to understand that this consciousness is deep. Indian industry understands they need resource security. They do not want conflict. So it is about our survival, it is about our health. And if you look at it, our government, both at the union level and at the state level, has incredible programs. There is nothing wrong with the intention of government. We have programs to clean the river, we have lake rejuvenation programs, we have clean air programs, we have waste programs, Swachh Bharat, we have a green states program initiative, and we need to recognize this, and particularly I will say to you, recognize it in the age of Trump. Then in the age of Trump, we still have huge commitment to safeguarding the environment, and our government has that intention to make sure that this is done. This is not small. I will not go through these chapters, but as you will see in the chapters of SOE, many of these issues that are important in the country are listed, whether it is plastic, the extended producer responsibility of plastic, whether it is the whole issue of biodiversity, which we will also talk about, the whole challenge of health and antimicrobial resistance, which is increasing because, not just because of the antibiotics we get off the counter, but increasing in the food that we produce. And that's important because in the food that we produce, whether it is the animals or whether it is aquaculture, the antibiotics that are used, and the government and the efforts to make sure that these are reduced. Then of course there is, and we will talk about the avian influenza. Climate change, I have spoken about. Renewable energy is a major issue, but there is huge commitment to 500 gigawatts. What's happening? Where have we reached? Where else we need to go? It is very clear for India that energy security is critical. We need to double our energy consumption between now and 2030. But we cannot afford pollution. So what do? We also need to provide energy to the poorest woman who still uses biomass to cook her fuel. This is in spite the incredible program of government on Ujjwala. So what needs to be done? Then of course rivers. And then the whole issue of water body, migration and heat, as I have mentioned, these are the big issues that Richard curated, put together, and I think the State of India's Environment Report, which we will release right now, is really a report which will help you to understand both the good news and the bad news. A state of affairs to tell us what more can and must we do. So what then is my assessment of 2025? When I look at the State of India's Environment Report, and I look at what's happening, as I said, there is commitment. But the problem is that investment is still not showing up in the scale of improvement that we need. And I will argue with you, it is because of three reasons. One, the scale of change on the ground is massive. We have increase of population, we have increased need for extraction, we have increase in demand and consumption on one hand, and then we have three main problems. Why the scale, in spite of the intention, in spite of the investment, we are not seeing the transformation that we need in our world. One, the programs are not designed for scale of transformation. They are still designed to do something. But what we need now is to understand that the other side, whatever is wrong is happening, the pollution, the population, that's huge. So the scale, the program scale has to be massive in terms of delivery. And now for that, and the second biggest weakness is the institutions for monitoring and regulations are weak. In earlier ADs and my writing, I have talked about, I have openly said to you that the system of environmental clearance in India is so broken that we should just close it. It does not work for industry and it does not work for environment. And this is not about this government, it is about progressive governments who have made sure that the system does not work. It is about committees who decide, who really have no accountability in terms of the way the program is going to be monitored for effectiveness. But third, and that's what I want to focus on, because problems are in this के अंदर, मगर हमें करना क्या है? That is what we need to talk about. The third part of it is we need a new approach for environmental management that works for us. We cannot follow the conventional way, which adds to cost and is affordable, so not affordable and not inclusive. This to me is the most important issue if we want environmental management to succeed in India. So we need to make sure that we can have development but not pollution. And we also have to make sure that we do not first pollute and then clean up. You know, the Western cities tell us that हम लोगों ने अपनी हवा साफ कर ली है. Which is true. You go to New York, even the air is clean, and you always come back saying, why is it we can't clean up our air? But the fact is, New York may have cleaned its local air, but the transport in New York has contributed to climate change. So it's also important for us to understand that the scale and the method of environmental management, where you keep polluting and keep cleaning up, doesn't work for them and will not work for us. If you take Yamuna, and I want to focus on Yamuna because we will talk about it tomorrow as well in a session. Yamuna is in news again, which is wonderful because I think there's an opportunity for us to talk about not just Yamuna but all rivers of India. So why is it we're not able to clean Yamuna? We're not able to clean Yamuna because we don't accept the reality of India, which is that vast numbers of people in our cities are not connected to the official sewage system. So CSE has done what is called shit flow diagrams, where we have tracked the shit in cities, कि कहाँ से आती है और कहाँ जाती है. And you will find the bulk of people are in unconnected, non-sewage systems. But the river cleaning works on intercepting sewage from officially connected households. And the rest of the households dispose their sewage through tankers, which again go into the same drains. And now as a result of it, and I brought this map for you, just for you to understand. These are the 22 drains of Delhi which lead into the Yamuna. Now the irony of this is that if you look at Najafgarh, you look at Kapasera, you look at Pappalgaram, you look at Basant Kunj, all these sewage treatment plants clean the water. But they put the cleaned water into the same drain which carries the untreated effluent of many colonies. So we are actually making sure, because of our focus on sewage treatment plants, we are making sure that the clean is mixed with the unclean. And as a result of it, the end impact at the river is the same, which is pollution. We have just done a paper, and Shushmita will talk about it tomorrow. We have taken the DPCC data, and we are showing you how the quality of river has not improved, even though the government says that 6,500 crore have been spent on cleaning the river in the last 4 years. This is government data. Now, I can abuse the government, but I don't think that's the point. The point is we need to understand why is it not working. And then to be able to suggest what needs to be done to make it work. And that's really what we are saying, that stop playing the catch-up game with sewage treatment plants, because as many sewage treatment plants you make up, the gap between what you have built and what needs to be built remains the same, 50%. So we need a different approach, and the new approach has to be to accept the reality of India, accept the fact that large areas in India are not connected to a sewage system, accept that this is modern India, not old India, that now these households which can use tankers to take their waste to a sewage treatment facility, they are part of your system. Make sure all tankers are registered, they have GPS, and all sludge is taken for treatment. Make sure that this is not mixed, and then recycle and reuse every drop of treated effluent. And this is where the whole issue of lakes and ponds in our city is both needed for heat management, but also for pollution management, and also for flood mitigation. The more the sponges in our cities, the lakes and ponds are there, the more they become points to also recharge and clean your sewage. So, the bottom line is, we need imagination, we need a new direction, and most importantly, we need the politics of inclusion. If it is not inclusive, not affordable, it cannot be sustainable. Anumita will talk about how in air pollution, the biggest challenge today is not just electrification of individual cars, but electrification of the mobility system. How do you make sure there are more people in buses? So you can buy an electric bus, but if the ridership in buses goes down, you still have a problem of air pollution. So you need to be able to look at it in terms of the agenda for mobility transformation. My biggest issue has been, my biggest failure in my life, if I was to say, has been not to get my second agenda going, which is that I believe forests should be cut. We need a wood-based economy. But there is huge resistance to this, because there's always a idea that अगर जंगल काटेंगे तो जंगल तबाह हो जाएंगे. और मेरा मानना ये है कि जितना ही पेड़ लगाओगे उतने काटोगे और उतने फिर लगाओगे, अगर you build the right incentive structures for a wood-based economy. In terms of agriculture, we are saying invest in improving resilience and productivity without adding to the cost of growing food, because we know in India food inflation is one big concern. We can't afford the cost of expensive food. So how do you improve the resilience without adding to the cost of food? And in the case of waste, and you will hear about it as well, the whole issue of circularity. Waste should not be waste. Waste should be reprocessed. Anumita will talk about this, but I've talked about how in air pollution, you're really not focusing on where you really need to go. If you look at the second bar chart and you look at the yellow part of it, that is private modes of transport that are increasing in our cities. So you will see that the private modes are increasing even as we are talking about air pollution. And clearly, that will not work. So finally, I want to take a moment to just say that these are tough times, and times are going to get tougher. As I spoke about at the beginning, the whole geopolitics of Trump, the whole green lash that we are seeing in the world, these times will get tougher. But we need to keep pushing for change. And as a community, we need to keep looking also for where there is good news. What is working so can inspire others to make the difference. Because you and we know one thing for certain, that this issue is about our survival. Environment is not about luxury. It is not about something you have after you have got rich. You need the right to clean air however poor you are. So it is about our survival. And you and me know that the threat is real. Whatever Donald Trump may say, the threat is real. And we have to act, and we have to keep, all of us have to make sure that we remain on track to keep reporting, writing, bringing news so that the world does not lose focus. Thank you very much.